cybersecurity and other high-tech fields, the time it takes from identifying a need to awarding a final contract often doesn't keep up with the evolving threats and challenges, much less the private sector innovation needed to meet them. Question: what committees do you wish to serve on in the next Congress that will position you to better help overhaul the federal acquisition process? And recognizing that this might take more than a year or two, would you commit to remaining on those committees long enough to seeing the job through to completion?
Well, I've served, acquisition reform is largely on the Government Reform Committee, where I served as chief counsel in the 90s after I worked for Congressman Wolf. So even though I'm not on that committee right now, we have working groups on all these issues. So oftentimes, as I was told by Frank years ago, you do not need to be on a particular committee to work for your constituents. So I've had roundtables where I've brought out the leadership of various committees to talk about acquisition reform, because that, again, sort of, we need to be working not at the speed of government, but at the speed of technology, and we have the experts here in our region to help us do that. I remember sitting down with John Wood several years ago and him going through on cyber, how we need to work through this more quickly. We also need to create that ecosystem where we have our big companies, and then we need to have our startups, and then we need to make sure, where I hear the most complaints on acquisition reform is from the medium-sized businesses who they've gotten some help on the startup, but then they're trying, when they get into that mid-range, that's when all the regulations really hit them. So we're going to them as the experts, asking them, how can we help and change? We did have some acquisition reform in the National Defense, I believe it was in the National Defense Authorization Act. We're trying to work it in a lot of different ways, but I can tell you, having the relationships that I have with the contracting community and with the experts on that has been a great asset for me to go to my colleagues and get these changes put into action.
Thank you. Ms. Bennett, 90 seconds for you.
I know in a very personal way how difficult the acquisitions process is in the federal government. In my business, we competed for GSA leases over a period of 10 to 15 years. It requires that you hire people up front, that you expend an awful lot of capital, taking tremendous risks to compete for these users. We need to streamline this process. We need to make it more predictable and easier, and I am committed to doing that. And I think I understand it well enough, having been through the process many, many times, exactly how to do that. One of the reasons the federal government is not able to be nimble and move quickly is this continuing resolution process that fails to adjust the amounts of spending that are allocated to each agency. When you have to fund the government at the same levels, in the same proportions that you did the previous year, you're not able to fund the new things that are so critical. So you end up following. We're basically have the same budget we had in 2010. That's got to change. We need a better process for running our government.
Thank you. Congresswoman Comstock, 60 seconds.
Okay. Well, again, I've already worked in this area and worked with all of you, so many of you leaders who are dealing with those problems. I have an open door. I not only invite everyone to come in, I go out and visit the companies and specifically ask, what do we need to change? What regulations are in place that are causing you problems, and advancing that technology and getting it into the field as quickly as possible? This is something important for our military, because we need to have them protected with the highest tech that they can in the field. So I have a record of already doing this. In terms of the budget, the House has often passed these budgets. I've only been there 2 years, but I've been working to get those budgets through, support this, and that's why I've always been one of those votes that they know I am going to work to compromise, work together. That's why I'm one of the 20 most bipartisan Republicans, because I understand if your federal government isn't working for you and we aren't using all the talent that we need to, that's a detriment for the country.
Thank you.